Hello again, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Founders and Leaders series. And again, delighted to be hosted by one of the leaders in our industry, Olaf Lenzmann, who is a co-founder and chief innovation and product officer with MarketLogic Software. Olaf, thank you very much for joining us.
Yeah, hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Where are you joining us from today? Whereabouts in the world are you?
Berlin. That's also where we headquartered.
At home in the thriving tech innovation hub that is Berlin and the growing research tech innovation landscape of Germany. We've got lots of new startups seem to be coming out. So great. Thanks for joining. So MarketLogic Software. So tell us a little bit about the company, what it does, how it adds value for the customers that you serve.
Yeah, sure. So what we do, maybe in a nutshell, is we provide our customers with a software platform where they can bring together everything they have in terms of understanding and research and knowledge and data about their consumers, markets, brands, bring that together, and then, of course, make it available for use, for application, to guide their innovation, activation, whatever other questions they have, so that effectively customers can make use of what they really do know and kind of overcome the problem of having a lot of information, but sitting in silos and not finding the way to the actual decisions. That's, I would say, the short of it. And of course, there's a lot of nuance and a lot of capabilities, but that's maybe the brief intro.
And this is mostly used by consumer insights experts, or is it other departments in organizations who use it?
Well, typically it is, I would say, led by the insights team because they do own the assets. And in that sense, we're their partner to help build that capability out. But of course, the ultimate consumers and the beneficiaries of the information and the capabilities are across the organization, brand teams, product and innovation teams, communication teams. So whoever needs insights to help them guide them and ground their decisions.
What types of organization, businesses, what kind of industries tend to be big users of your solution?
It's of course driven by the need to understand your consumer. So a large fraction of our customer base is in CPG, but it doesn't end there. It's also other industries from automotive, financial services, retail, etc. Healthcare is a strong segment. So I'd say anybody who really needs to understand their consumer at scale is basically in the sweet spot for making use of this kind of capabilities.
How long has MarketLogic been established? I remember, I think it must be 10 years ago, reading a Harvard Business Review article about Unilever's tech stack and infrastructure that mentioned the MarketLogic platform. How long have you been around?
It's been a long journey. We started more from a project perspective to work on the topic already, and you call it 2006, 2007, and we've been working on it quite a while until we, in the early 10s, had really a commercial product to address that problem. So we've been around the block for a long time. I think, around about 15 years, we do sell this kind of product, and it's seen, of course, a lot of evolution ever since then. But I think the basic premise still holds, but now technology can give us, of course, so much more leverage to bring it to life and really make it happen.
So, relatively speaking, and I want to say this in a way which is not at all disparaging, but an established organization in the research tech space, where we look at how many kind of new, relatively new startups there've been. But if it makes you feel more recently founded, one of our other conversations this week was with Discuss, and Voxco, part of that organization, is about 50 years old. So actually founded in the late 70s in Canada. So
that's a different story. But also at the same time, while it sounds like an eternity and sometimes you feel like a dinosaur, but there has been so much change and constant reinvention. Like if I look at both the market, but also at the products and our products now compared to what it was 3 years ago, it's almost a new company already. Sure.
Talk a bit about that, because the product has evolved a lot with generative AI capability, doesn't it?
Yeah, indeed. When we started out back in the day, it was all about, if I may even take a little step back, when we started originally, what we aimed to do was help people make better decisions in product and brand. And then as we embarked on the journey, we quickly found actually to make better decisions, the most important thing you need is better data and better understanding. So we kind of went upstream from directly looking at how to support the decision making to figuring out how to better get the data you need and how to better make sense of it. And that's how we kind of went upstream into all this research and insights. And initially it was a lot about, I'd say, knowledge management for insights. You would collect all the stuff and you make it searchable and try to surface things for people. But now in the last 3 years or so with generative AI, that has unlocked so much more opportunity and so many angles of how you can make use of the information, not only to make it more accessible to people, to make it better contextualized and easier to work with and more relevant to the situations. But now I would say what we've seen over the past 6 months or so is that also technology has reached a level where it can do things that are so much more than just, let's say, answering a question or finding the relevant content, but it can really connect a lot of dots and come back with a lot of insightful, in a sense, suggestions, ideas, proposals that I think will turn out to be quite changing the way people work with this kind of information.
Yeah. So useful segue, I think, into kind of taking a broader view of what's happening in the industry. You have a solution, DeepSights, which connects all these different sources of data, insights, research, internal, external, and then allows people to interrogate them or connect them to other systems or automate different things. So we're at this point in development where AI broadly, if it's still a meaningful term, is enabling a lot of change. So tell us a bit about your take on some of the bigger trends, how this is changing the way that organizations make decisions, like you say, in product and brand, or how they're structuring, or their internal processes. What are some of the bigger trends that you're seeing?
That's a great question, and there's of course so much there to unpack. I mean, I'd say, as I said earlier, 3 years ago it was all about knowledge management, and then you could use AI a little bit to make things easier and more intelligent, and that's still the bread and butter use case for most organizations, because it also takes time for them to adopt it, to really build the muscle to work with these things. And so that's still, I would say, the core of how people use it today, just making sure all the lovely assets that they've invested into are being reused and they don't duplicate research spend on things they know already, et cetera, et cetera. But what we see now is a lot of growth into new use cases where it's not about give me just back the information or answer a question or write me a report on a certain topic and what we know about that, but really carry it forward to the actual application use cases and help me in really solving my problem instead of just giving me information into this, injecting information into this process. And yeah, some of the things are, for example, I mean, obviously everybody's raving about synthetic research and personas. That is, even to me, a surprisingly strong topic and hot topic and extremely strong demand that we see there on that end. I mean, that's something where we started out maybe a year ago or so and saw an opportunity, but we're ourselves a little bit skeptical in terms of how well will it work and also how much will people really want to use, because there's always obviously the fundamental question and reservation about trustworthiness and is that really something you could use? But I was pretty much blown away by the demand for it. I mean, actually, it works better than I would have expected personally it to work. And I mean, I'm sure you've seen there's also been papers from CallPal, for example, who did some research and compared what personas tell me in comparison to what real people tell me and how accurate that is. But also we see that organizations really strongly focus on that and want to build on it and bring it to life. And I believe a core driver for that is that it is such a great instrument to bring the knowledge they have to life in a practical way. Like we have so many customers who have strategic assets, knowledge assets they work on, like they invest into demand spaces or other kinds of research they continuously do, and they have lovely dashboards and reports and everything. But it's so difficult to work with it in real life. And now if you use things like bring personas to life based on that data, you can suddenly begin to kind of talk to your data and talk to those virtual consumers. And that's why I think it's such a strong pull to make it, to A, leverage those assets that are there, and then B, also to make it useful for people in the business, in the situations where they have questions, in a way that's very natural and human to interact with that. So that's a very strong topic at the moment with a lot of pull. The next wave actually we're seeing and we're working on with some customers now is really to settle onto that by fully going into it, supporting the innovation journey itself. And we're working there on some product or some product launch, some product also already, which really helps people to have this kind of collaboration with the AI. And that also is a bit of a mode shift from, let's say, the early days when you said, oh, AI, that's, I push a button, that does the job, it comes back with a result. I don't have to think anymore. Everything is just getting easier. And now we're moving into those use cases, like, as I said, innovation, for example, where we help people to say, really go through a structured journey in your innovation, through your innovation playbook, whatever it is that you have, starting by maybe finding innovation territories and then developing ideas and then bringing them into concepts, etc. And do that in this kind of back and forth between the experts from the business, from the inside side, and the AI. And that, of course, for example, can leverage personas again. So you can have kind of your consumer also at the table in the process already automatically. And that brings a lot of interesting opportunity. Of course, opportunity for the insights teams to be much closer and a little bit more directing in that process, but also, again, a lot of opportunity to activate all the assets you have. Like, as I said, whatever segmentations, consumer knowledge, UNAs, demand spaces you have, and whatever also assets you have in terms of, for example, innovation testing you've been doing, which you can now you reuse in a targeted way, which is also a way of working with SAP beyond that. And interestingly, unlike what I said earlier, the simple use case of I'll delegate it to the AI and I don't have to think anymore, what we find now is for these use cases, it really turns around and you have to think so much more and harder now. Because what the AI does, it is goes through all the data and gives you now a broad array of very well structured, according to whatever your journey and philosophy is, very well structured candidates and suggestions with a deep and 360-degree view. And now I, as a human, I can add, and I have to add my experience and judgment, but it is quite challenging because you really now need to engage with all this fully formed 360 view on the possible options. And that can be we see quite an interesting, I should say, mismatch with expectations where people think, oh, AI, I'm going to hit a button and it's going to be fine. No, you'll hit a button and it will think deeply for 30 minutes and then you will be presented with the full universe of the problem. And now it's up to you to wrap your head around it and make the decisions and direct where to go next. So I think it's a great tool to be vastly more efficient and effective also. But it's a different way of working, really.
It's interesting because I think the sort of maybe slightly simplistic view of a lot of AI tools as they've been introduced over the last few years is it will simplify, speed up, make things much more efficient at the processing end of things. In reality, what you're saying is it's not necessarily just going to be about saving time on those things because it presents you with maybe a more sophisticated, rounded set of decisions to make. Maybe some people might find that a bit overwhelming because it's not just a push thing, it's a bit more involving. And I guess it seems to me like a lot of these changes and the nuances of it's a different type of work or a different way of working are going to have quite big changes on team structures, the skill sets, the workflows. So are you starting to see that? You mentioned personas. Are they attractive? Are they compelling for people maybe outside of the research and insights expert pool in, product innovation, executive groups, whatever? Is this really changing? Are these capabilities changing how organizations structure and conduct the work?
I think it's a little bit too early to say. It's really emerging at this point. I feel what we see is that the insights team is, in a sense, still evolving also their role as a gatekeeper, if you will, to say we make sure that the information we expose to the organization is vetted and can be used. And we make clear what maybe also the guardrails are to use it. So, of course, you don't want to have everybody in the organization spin up whatever weird persona based on whatever data of doubtful provenance. So that's what the insights teams really care about, that this is well defined and has system and method. But then to make it available and unlocks a lot of new ways of working. But I think everybody's still also grappling with what does it really mean in terms of, as you say, organizational setup, but also in terms of way of working and just procedure, if you will. Just when I think about the innovation topic, I mean, mostly people have their playbooks and the way they do innovation, and mostly it's about stages and steps and different things need to be prepared by the insights team. Briefings need to be written, insights materials need to be shared. There's workshops, there's ways of interacting also between humans, which is super important for this creative element. And now you suddenly have this AI tool there in the room, so to speak, but that also means you have to kind of interact in a bit of a different way. And I think that's still something where also just the practical way of working is still evolving. You don't want to lose this interactive human element. And at the same time, you want to make use of all the smartness, if you will, and leverage all the data that the AI can bring to the table. And that requires a bit of hybrid approach, which I think is still evolving at this point, how to do it really.
So there's a couple of things in that. I'll put some specifics around innovation in a minute, but you touched on something, which is the insights organizations need to be, very close to the outputs and the processes to ensure that, quality data is being fed into stakeholder teams, that they're not, misusing stuff. What are some of the other risks that you see for insights teams in managing this? You mentioned earlier that you were, even though you had expectations for the personas, even you were quite sort of surprised at the effectiveness of it.
Yeah.
But what are some of the downside risks? If it hadn't been as effective, or even in the capabilities that you have, what do people need to be careful about?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always this tension between making sure things don't go wrong and avoiding mistakes, but at the same time also helping to mint new successes and thinking positively about things. So I believe it's important and fundamentally correct that the insights teams are vetting those things and are the ones who are establishing maybe the guardrails there. And I think there is some elements of procedure in making sure the tools you pick and the data sources you pick are the right ones, etc. But then there's also a lot of internal enablement, maybe education. But some of that can also be kind of built into the tools themselves now these days with AI. So you can also set guardrails there to make sure it's not abused or used in the fundamentally wrong way. So I think there is a responsibility, and it always was traditionally the responsibility of insights to prevent mistakes, prevent costly mistakes, launching products that won't work, etc. But I think it evolves and elevates how this is going to be implemented. And I think insights functions will need to have more of a systems thinking in future. How does their thinking, the value they can bring to the table, but also the guardrails they need to establish, how can that be imprinted really on this, let's say, more evolving ecosystem of AI, human technology, organization, so it scales better? I mean, I think the times are over where people as humans could control it. There'll be so many flows now that are cast somehow, I'm going to say invisible, but under the reps, and you need to make sure that like the system is architected in a way that it takes that into account, and that I think is a challenge because it requires a bit of a different way of thinking about the problem, but the problem is the same in a way.
No, I think it fills people with wonder and horror equally when they look at the future. They think there are going to be agent to agent workflows in insights that that happen so quickly and in such an automated way that the potential loss of control is something that gives people anxiety, I think.
Yeah, I can relate to that, but on the other hand, I would say from our experience, reliability of AI was a much bigger problem 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, of course, it's still making mistakes, but also if you work with humans, they do make mistakes as well. So critical thinking remains to be important anyway, and of course having the right decision points. But I think there is no possible way of like turning back the clock or stopping this. It's just also too much opportunity there.
You mentioned though about the scope for human error, will persist, has existed since forever. It struck me that, one of the potential risks here is the ability of stakeholder teams who may be interacting with AI personas or other, conversational data tools, their abilities to frame and ask questions in the right way. I've seen people in product teams and marketing teams asking questions of a persona that a researcher would never ask in that way, or, maybe would use a slightly indirect approach or that type of thing.
Yep.
I think that there will be more of a requirement for insights teams to train and to coach and to kind of distribute that native research thinking skill into the organization because of these tools.
Yes, but again, interestingly, so this is a problem and it needs to be addressed. But again, here you can go with the system. So of course you will need to educate the humans about how all of this works, about their critical thinking, about how to approach things. But you can also infuse a lot of that knowledge into the system itself. Like in the earlier days, also like a year ago, let's say, when you would be interacting with AI, it was a lot about you need to make sure the prompts are right and you need to really come with your problem very well described to get a proper response. Now, capabilities have evolved. Those models are becoming smarter. There are smarter ways of staging the whole interaction so that now you can actually just come with your vastly underspecified problem, and the AI in the first step will guide you through formulating it in the right way and owning the question and also challenging whether that's the right way to look at it or to ask the question, and only then proceed to maybe go to the actual subject matter and figure out what the answer might be. So I think, again, yes, educating folks, but also at the same time, systems thinking, where in this whole system flow can we put in our expertise as the insights team to make sure that things are pre-qualified, things are sharpened and done in the right way, and then give the system the mission to make sure that happens. Again, it's not going to be perfect, but there's a lot of potential there that I think we also just begin to really take advantage of.
So engineering out the sycophancy and the base models of, that's a great question, Mike, which is a response I get from ChatGPT. One last thing before, I'd love to dig more into your experience sort of building the business and that story. But just before we do, innovation is an area that, I'm particularly intrigued by. The potential for AI tools to inject more insights, capability, more consumer-centric, customer-centric thinking. Have you already seen, maybe measurable is too strong, but, have you already seen organizations feel like they're getting a step change in maybe the volume of good ideas that are being generated or the quality of ideas that are going further in the funnel? Or, do you see that happening yet, or is it still a bit early?
It's a bit early days. We have some customers who are a bit further down the road already. We'll be having, for example, a session at IEX next week with Terra, talking about those experiences on the innovation front and what we have already seen. But so far, most of the more tangible statements are rather about, again, the efficiencies, because they're easy and obvious to measure. Like, how quickly can you now go through the process? How quickly can you maybe fill funnel with quality ideas, but, for the whole journey to go through the funnel, to go to the market, to really make a difference and get that feedback loop, that's going to still take a moment. But, when again, like with the personas, where I said earlier, I was a little bit skeptical myself, how well is it going to work? Also with this innovation approach, of course, I was concerned, we'll build that out, we'll do everything we can to take all the data, all the material, to take all the knowledge of the innovation playbooks the customers have. But how good will it actually be what comes out? And so far, to me, the learning it seems to be pretty good. The biggest challenge I get from our customers there is we have to make it easier, more consumable, more navigable for the human to really understand the whole space of possibilities and all the angles and not be overwhelmed by it. But interestingly, I have yet to hear the feedback that was not relevant, was besides the point. Yes, maybe the language needs to be different here and there, et cetera, et cetera. But it seems really that just from the pure content perspective, that works really well. It is a matter of now getting the AI human interaction going in the best possible way. And there is still learnings to be made. So I think my early take is simply content-wise, a lot of potential. How to bring it to life then in the actual process, in the workshops, etc. There's still a lot of learning happening as people go along.
Feels like a microcosm of the sort of broader AI capability running a bit ahead of enterprises' abilities to adapt, system skills, processes to make the most of the capability.
But also for everyone else, individually, it's really learning to.
Yeah. Okay, so sort of 20-ish years, the business has been in existence, sort of 15 plus, with in market with a proposition. Can you share some of the lessons that you've learned along the way? Maybe some of the things that have surprised you, some of the things you'd definitely do the same, and some of the things maybe that you would have done differently.
Yeah, well, hindsight is always easy, of course. I think for building business in that space, and again, today is a very different environment than it was 10 years ago. But one of the big tensions always was for us and how we approached it. How are we going to balance building a product and working with the individual customer? Because our customers are big enterprises. If you work with Unilever, like you said earlier, that's not one of 10,000 customers. That is a very important and sophisticated customer. And of course, it takes a lot of work and focus and dedication to make it work for Unilever or the next customer. And at the same time, you want to build a product that scales. So that is a huge tension. And I don't think we've always got that right. Who has? Ultimately, I think the lesson is it requires the leadership of the thought leadership to guide the customer to what is the right solution, and not to be getting into some kind of reactive mode and saying, oh, that's how you want to do it. And then you are trying to meet an expectation, and that quickly becomes unsustainable if you have many customers. So really think through the problem and have a vision that you can bring people on board to and work with you towards that. That's what can work, not so much going out and trying to, let's say, how do you think we should go from here? Because then you'll have 15 different directions with 15 customers and you'll struggle a lot. So that was, I think, one of the we got much better at that over time. You can also go overboard with the vision, obviously. There was a point where we decided to invest a lot into replatforming And it was when we were maybe a little bit taking a few steps too far at one point in time. And that also meant that we had a lot of tension where customers couldn't follow us yet for various reasons. So it takes a while to find the balance in each situation.
Yeah.
I think.
That feels to me like the sort of central tension in building for customers, but not for each customer. So a product business, a product organization clearly needs to create something that is, repeatable, scalable, but driven by the needs of enough customers. If you start being led too much by individual customers, you become effectively a consultancy that's building tailored solutions for each company, don't you? So I guess balance.
You want to learn. You want to learn from everybody. You want to kind of synthesize the best, but that is really a tricky game. But
then the learnings over time, I guess. What do you feel? You look back and you think, what are some of the highlights, the things you're proud of in terms of decisions made around building, growing the business?
I think as we initially approached the problem, we made some right decisions, just even to get the whole business off the ground. I mean, back in the day when, again, in the very early days when it was all about more knowledge management, one simple trick we did, which proved to be very successful to get a knowledge system off the ground, was how to overcome the challenge that everybody wants to get the data, but nobody wants to put it in. And so what we did there was we built kind of a hybrid system where you'd have this knowledge management component, but you also had a component that helped folks to run their research projects best practice way. And by virtue of using this capability, it kind of became a side product that the end result of what they did ended up in the system. And so you overcame this challenge of having a separate system where people would need to go and upload stuff, et cetera, et cetera. So I think some of those technical things, how to make the journeys work, were, I think, good. And other than that, I think it was a good decision for us that we jumped on the Gen AI topic very early. I remember when GPT-3 came out in late 22, I believe. And we were able to secure an API key. That's pretty much where we started jumping on it and exploring what would be possible. And even though it was clear that was nowhere near good enough, we simply bet on the fact that it will become better by the time we are ready. This will have taken steps and we will have something that will be workable and make sense. And I think that continues to be the case. You'll have to think just 2 steps ahead and already start building things where maybe today's technology is not quite there yet, but by the time you have it, probably it's going to be able to support it.
So that was a very pertinent observation about, the challenge, if it is a knowledge management solution, actually getting the knowledge in there is friction. And the solution is less really a technological one. It's more of a process and behavioral, isn't it? Than just the kind of feature capabilities.
Yeah.
What would you do differently? Are there any mistakes that you would own up to, or let's say different decisions you would make if you were doing this again now?
Well, I think at some point as I said earlier, we decided to re-platform the whole solution, which was per se the right decision, but the way we approached it was a bit too aggressive, I would say. Essentially, we went through a one-way door and embarked on doing that with a bet that we can pull it off in a certain amount of time, which we couldn't after all. And that led to a lot of suffering, I want to say, until we closed all those gaps. So I think the overall direction and decision was right, the way we executed it. Definitely substantially different today. That was, of course, a learning, but more, let's say, operational learning, how to approach that. Yeah, but other than that, I would say, yes, many, many learnings from the real world and from how you work with the customers. I think ultimately it's always about solving the problem of the customer. It's always about putting yourselves into their shoes and seeing the world with their eyes and not with your own eyes. And of course, sometimes also you fall short and don't do that as much as you should do it, maybe also you and I guess. But I think that's simply the big learning is whenever you really come to a common understanding with the customer of what the problem is and what you want the solution to be, then you usually have established a pathway to work with them together on a successful outcome. And then you just have to bridge that with a problem you want to build a product, not a solution.
Okay, good. So just to wrap things up, I think we're coming to the end. I think a lot of this advice is actually implicit in a few of the things you've just said. But let's imagine that you're meeting someone who is a wannabe founder in this industry. They want to start a business, research technology. Is there is there one particular piece of advice or a kind of strong bit of guidance that you would like to give them?
Yeah, when it comes to research technology, I would say maybe two things. One is think about what the world might look like in 3 years from now and how you would fit in there. I would not start doing anything that's purely grounded in technology capabilities now because everybody else can do that. So there has to be something more to it. So what's the sustainable thing that keeps you in the business? Is it maybe human expertise and a service component, or is it a specific partner system, or is it a way that your philosophy is of compounding knowledge? So the more customer uses you, the harder it gets to switch and the more value they get out of it. But there has to be some secret sauce that is more than I have a great conceptual idea and AI now allows me to do it, because somebody else will come with an even smarter conceptual idea in 6 months and also do it. And that's a tough problem. And I think it's something that actually applies to all software industry, where now building the actual capability itself is not the bottleneck anymore. It's finding a model of value delivery and also finding a model of stickiness that keeps you in the business and kind of immunizes, that's a word, you against this again.
Yeah. The kind of any sustainable or any hope for it of sort of sustainable advance that's purely technology based is naive.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Okay. Fantastic advice to finish on. Olaf, thank you very much for being so generous with your time. I really enjoyed the conversation. And
thanks for having me. That was great.
Super. So thanks for anyone else listening or watching. You've been hearing the wit and wisdom of Olaf Lenzmann, who is the co-founder, Chief Innovation Product Officer for Market Logic Software and DeepSights, the solution for knowledge management and integration. So we are wrapping this one up now. We have many other conversations like this in the pipeline. And interestingly, most of those on the agenda are not North American technology companies. We have companies based out of France, out of the UK, elsewhere in Europe and beyond. So I'm very much looking forward to those conversations. I hope you'll be back joining us for some of those in the near future. And once again, thanks very much to Olaf and the Market Logic team.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of you.